So we talked about the different general sensations, touch, pressure, vibration. We were talking about pain. Okay, that's where we stopped. So I told you, what is it that triggers the pain receptors? It is damage to the tissue which leads to release of chemical substances, and they stimulate the free nerve endings which lead to pain. Now you do have two different types of pain, three different types of which we talked about last class, referred pain, but superficial pain, pain that arises from the superficial tissues like the skin and the tissue underneath it, the adipose tissue, the hypodermis, or the tissues under it. Superficial pain is something which you can exactly pinpoint and say where the pain is occurring. It is very well localized. So if you have a cut on the skin, you know exactly where the pain is. And it is generally a very sharp pricking pain. Okay, it's a sharp pricking pain that you feel. And you know, the most of the nerve fibers, the sensory nerve fibers that transmit this superficial pain from your skin and deeper structures, these are myelinated. Okay, they are generally myelinated. So that's why you feel the sharp pain very quickly, and majority of them are myelinated fibers. Now there is another second type of pain which is referred to as the deep pain. Deep pain usually arises from muscles and joints. Okay, so muscles, joints, and deeper structures. That is something which you can't pinpoint. So whenever you have muscle pain, it's never one particular spot. You will say this whole region feels sore. Okay, and you can never say, when you're asked, can you point out where exactly the pain is? You will always say general area there is pain. Okay, so it is poorly localized, and deep pain is generally associated with nausea and vomiting, and sometimes if it is severe, it can also have there can be changes in blood pressure as well. Okay, and deeper pain is usually transmitted by unmyelinated nerve fibers, so pain fibers. So generally if you sort of take on an average nerve fibers that carry pain sensation and nerve fibers that carry temperature sensation, these are generally unmyelinated. These are generally unmyelinated. Those that carry touch, pressure, vibration, proprioception, they are all myelinated. Okay, so sensory nerves most of the pain fibers and temperature fibers are unmyelinated, whereas those that carry touch, pressure, vibration, and proprioception, these are generally myelinated. Now the last one that we talked about was referred pain, which is also known as visceral pain. Visceral means pain arising from internal organs. Okay? And the problem with internal organs is that unlike the skin and the deepest tissues that have lots of pain nerve fibers, internal organs don't have that many. Okay? The number of pain receptors are less as you go deeper into the body. The number of pain receptors, the number of temperature receptors are less. So organs do not have too much of pain nerve fibers. So when does pain come from an internal organ? When the organ stretches. Okay, if the smooth muscle stretches, it can cause pain. or if the smooth muscle contracts and goes into a spasm, pain can arise. Okay, so internal organ, the pain is usually due to the smooth muscles, which are either stretching, excessive stretch, or it could be due to an excessive contraction of the smooth muscle. So all of us have experienced some amount of intestinal abdominal pain when you have food poisoning. You feel that spasm, okay, you feel the spasm. Now, majority of the time, the pain that arises from internal organs is not felt over the organ. Like I told you last time, it is usually felt at a region away from the organ. That's why you call it referred pain. So visceral pain is usually referred. And most often, whenever there is pain coming from an internal organ, the person will definitely experience vomiting, nausea, sweating will be there, blood pressure changes will be seen. Okay? And these were the examples that I gave you last time. Okay, I gave you example of where you can feel the pain. So heart, majority of the time the patient will not come complaining. Very rarely they'll say that, oh, I have severe pain on my chest, left side of the chest. Most of the time they will say, I have pain, severe pain along my left arm and my left jaw. Okay, so, or the back, left back. So you can't send them home. You have to do a ECG, you have to investigate, you have to do a blood test to see whether the person is undergoing a heart attack. There have been many cases where people have been sent back home and they have passed off because it was a heart attack. So whoever is there, the nurse or the ER doctor, should be familiar with referred pain. Okay? So these are things, that's why, when I tell you that you might think, okay, why these things, I have to learn it for the exam and then I forget. It's not that. This is knowledge. Because you have one patient, you make a mistake and you send them, okay, back, and if the patient passes off, trust me, you can't live with it because you have, because of your lack of knowledge, a life has been lost. So that is the reason why I keep telling you that when you study with concentration, study with this in mind that you are going to be looking after patients who have a life. You're not taking care of a computer. If this thing gets damaged, you can try to get it repaired. If it doesn't get repaired, you can trash it and buy another new one. But you can't do that with life, okay? So this is a grievance. We were just talking about how students are cheating with the help of AI. Everything can be, you can get everything on AI. So these are things which are very worrisome, especially in the healthcare field. It's very worrisome because nowadays you put your symptoms into AI, the AI diagnoses it. Okay, it's a good thing, but what about, what kind of healthcare workers are going to come out if you are just going to, just cheat your way through the exams and then, come out as a healthcare worker? I don't know. I'm glad that I'm retiring in a few years, okay? Education, the future of education seems to be, AI is like it's like a sword, double-edged sword. It can be helpful, it can be harmful as well. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because this is important. And increasingly we are seeing students cheating in online exams. There's no way, there's no integrity, no honesty. And these are students who are going to become nurses and doctors and healthcare workers. It's very worrisome, it's very worrisome. And there's no way you can do anything about it. But anyway, so that apart, you must know about referred pain because you can't send a patient back, okay? And then liver, if there's damage to the liver, usually the pain is felt on the right tip of the right shoulder. So sometimes when they come with severe pain here, initially physicians may send them back with some Motrin or Advil or whatever. But if it repeatedly happens, then they have to think about, is the liver and the gallbladder affected? Are they having gallstones? Okay? So all these things have to be in the mind. And appendix, which is on the right lower quadrant, there's no pain there. They will come with pain around the navel or in the epigastrium. Okay. Similarly, kidney pain or pain in the ureters because of a stone, low back, or in the groin region, very close to the genitals. Okay, so these are lots of things like that. So this is called referred pain. Okay, pain is not felt over the organ which is undergoing damage, but it is felt on a region of the skin away from the organ. That is what is referred pain. Okay. The reason why you feel referred pain, okay, there are theories for that. I'm not going to go into the detail. I'm just going to briefly tell you why pain is not felt over the organ, but it is felt on a region away from the organ. So if you look at the skin, our entire body, the skin, you can map out the sensory nerve that is carrying sensations from every region of the skin. Okay, so for if my forearm is touched, there is a sensory nerve that is carrying the information into the spinal cord. So every portion of the skin you can map out which spinal nerve is carrying the sensation. This is called a dermatome. Okay, the portion of the skin that is supplied by a sensory nerve is called a dermatome. So you can make a map of this. You can make a dermatome map like this. So right from the neck onwards, you can see, of course, face is trigeminal nerve, so we leave out the face. From the neck down, it is all your spinal nerves. So every portion of the skin you can map out. Okay? So you see right at the top, that is C2, C3, C4, that is cervical 4. So that is the nerve that will be carrying the sensation into the spinal cord. So for the legs, front of the leg, you can see the thigh here, it is lumbar 2, L2 nerve, which is going to carry the sensation. Knee, L3. So by knowing the dermatomes, okay, if you're going to go in for a physician assistant program or med school, you will have to know these dermatomes. Okay? At this stage, I'm not asking you to memorize it, but you will have to know the dermatomes, because if a person comes with, they say, I have tingling and pain on my front of my knee, then you should know that it could be the lumbar 3, the third lumbar spinal nerve, L3 spinal nerve, which might be getting compressed, or there must be something going wrong with that. Or if the person has pain along the back of the leg, all the way down like that, okay, right up to the foot, severe pain, you have to think about the second sacral spinal nerve. Okay, so that is where the sciatic nerve comes from. So this is what is sciatica, pain along the back of the leg. So you have to know the dermatomes. So every part of the skin, there is a spinal nerve that is carrying the sensation from that portion of the skin. Okay, so now we come to referred pain. So just know what a dermatome is. A dermatome is a portion of the skin supplied by a single spinal nerve. Okay, that is a dermatome. You don't have to memorize the dermatome map, but for referred pain, this is what will help explain referred pain. So in referred pain, let's say the kidney is experiencing, there is something happening in the kidney which is stimulating the pain nerve fibers in the kidney. Okay? Now these these sensations from the kidney are carried by the spinal nerve into the spinal cord, okay, at a particular level. Now, synapse occurs between the sensory neuron and the interneuron, which is going to carry the sensation up to the brain. But this second neuron also receives pain information from the region of the skin, which is at the back, lower back. Okay? So the pain nerve fibers from the region of the skin where the pain is being felt and the pain nerve fibers coming from the organ, they synapse on the same interneuron. Okay? The synapse happens in the same interneuron. And this will then carry the information up. Pain and temperature, you know, anterolateral spinothalamic tract will carry the information up to the parietal lobe, your primary sensory cortex. And when the information reaches the neuron over there, remember sensory projection. I told you that a sensation is always projected to the region of the skin. Let's go back to that first slide. Sensory projection. Whenever the brain receives an information about a sensory stimulus, the neuron here is the one that is interpreting it as pain or temperature or pressure. But you don't feel it here. You feel the pain or the temperature or pressure in the region where the receptor is located, where the starting point is. That's where you feel the pain. So, because of this projection, so if you go back to this, since the pain nerve fibers from the damaged organ and the pain nerve fibers from the skin where the pain is being felt, they synapse with the same neuron. So when this information reaches the brain misinterprets it because it thinks the skin is where I always get information from, because the skin is the one that is exposed to the outside. So every time the brain receives information, it's usually from the skin. It hardly receives any sensory pain information from the internal organs. This is the rare, because only if the organ is damaged, it's going to receive the pain. But this is an organ from which it constantly is receiving information. So the brain misinterprets that signal and thinks that the pain is coming from the skin. So you feel it on the skin and not over the organ. So that is the theory that helps to explain referred pain. Yes. Okay. Now, have you seen this ointment on the pharmacy shelves? Have you seen this? Capsaicin for pain?
Yeah.
It's very common. Next time you go to CVS or wherever you buy your products, you see capsaicin. You go to the aisle where it is pain, so you have all Bengay and all those other stuff. That's where you will see capsaicin. Capsaicin is nothing but what is found in hot peppers. Okay? So when you eat hot pepper, the sensation that you get, okay, it is actually pain nerve fibers that are being stimulated. Okay? So when you look at the taste sensations, there are, from long back, we know about 4 primary taste sensations. So your tongue has receptors for detecting 4 types of taste. One is sweet taste, sugars, salt. Okay. Third, sour. Sour is usually acidic. Acidic foods will taste sour. And then last is bitter. bitter taste, okay, which is usually due to alkaloids that are found in certain vegetables and fruits, bitter. So sweet, salt, sour and bitter are considered to be the 4 primary taste sensations. So we have taste buds, we have taste receptors for each of these. Okay, we have taste receptors in the tongue and in the back of the throat for these. Now, when I was a student in 70s, 80s, this was what it was. Then they added a 5th taste sensation. Umami, yes. So now there are 5 primary taste sensations. The 5th one is called umami. Umami is the taste that you get from the MSG. Okay, monosodium glutamate, which is what is added in most Oriental cooking, Japanese, Chinese, Korean cooking. They use a lot of MSG. MSG is monosodium glutamate. So MSG is added to the food as a flavor enhancer. It enhances the flavor of food. Okay, flavor enhancer. That is now considered as a separate taste sensation because they have found some receptors for this. Okay. So now there are 5 primary taste sensations instead of 4. Currently there are 5 primary. So it's not 4, it's 5. Okay. Now what about the hot pepper that when you consume hot peppers, chili, why do you get that sensation? What sensation is it? Does it fall in any of these 5? No, it doesn't. So hot pepper, when you eat hot peppers and if you're not fond of it, your face becomes red, you start tearing up, your nose starts running. Hot peppers stimulate pain nerve fibers. So that sensation that you get when you're eating hot peppers is stimulation of pain nerve fibers. It is not stimulating any of your other taste buds. So the ingredient in hot peppers which is making it hot is capsaicin. This is the chemical that is making it hot. So capsaicin, why does it stimulate pain nerve fibers? Because it opens those voltage gated sodium channels in pain nerve fibers. And so action potentials are produced. But what they have noticed is the more you consume hot peppers, the less you feel that sensation, because if you continue to use hot peppers, it desensitizes the pain nerve fibers. So the pain nerve fibers are now almost like they don't carry any action potentials. So that's why, if you look at cooking, traditional Indian cooking is very spicy. We do eat a lot of hot chili peppers. So if I cook like that, none of my friends here will be able to eat it because it's too spicy. Okay, so we use a lot of spices, we use a lot of chili peppers as well. Okay, so for us, because we are used to that food, we get desensitized. Okay, so we are able to eat it without any problem, but not for everybody. So when you repeatedly use it, the pain nerve fibers get desensitized. So that is the principle of using capsaicin as an ointment for pain. So when you have muscle pain and all that, you can use capsaicin. So that's why it's available as an ointment. Okay, so it will reduce the pain, but please remember, it is not going to cure the reason for the pain. It's just a topical application. It will give you temporary relief, but it's not going to treat the root cause of the pain. If the pain is because of some joint, if some ligament is torn, it's not going to help with that. For that, you will need a surgery or you will need, immobilization. But it will at least help to reduce the pain. because you apply it. So it is just like Bengay and other things which have menthol in it. This is capsaicin. Okay, so it can be used for some of the nerve disorders. Like if people have some pain, big nerve pain, you can use capsaicin. If you have shingles, it's a viral infection, so shingles causes a lot of pain, so you can use that. Okay, but you please remember that it doesn't cure the condition itself, the underlying condition. Now, so this is what a sensory neuron looks like. So we finished the sensations. So always remember the cell body of the unipolar neuron is located in the dorsal root ganglion or the posterior root ganglion. Okay, so the two ends. So this is a unipolar or pseudo-unipolar neuron. So it's going to have two branches like that. One branch is called the peripheral process. Okay, this is called the peripheral process. This is called the central process. Central because it's going into the spinal cord. So the peripheral process is the one that is going to act like a receptor. This is the receptor. So right here it could be free nerve endings, or you could have a Merkel's disc or a Pacinian corpuscle, whatever. So this is where the receptor is. And it's going to, once the receptor is stimulated, the action potentials will travel through the sensory root, that is from the back, and then it will go into the spinal cord and synapse with the interneuron that is here, okay, in the gray matter of the spinal cord. This is the posterior horn. And then it will carry the information up to the brain, okay, and the brain will interpret the signal as that particular sensation, touch or pain or temperature. Okay, so that is the sensory component of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, now we are going to look at the motor component. Motor component is what supplies your muscles and glands. So we are going to look at the motor component. So for the motor, so peripheral nervous system, remember it has a sensory component, a sensory nerve that is carrying the information up, and then you have a motor part of the peripheral nervous system. So the motor component, you have, again, it's a lot of details, but the bare minimum. When you look at the motor output, there are two important neuronal groups that are important. One is the upper motor neuron and the second is the lower motor neuron. Okay? Now the upper motor neuron is located in the primary motor cortex in the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe. That is where you have the upper motor neuron. That is, this is the one that is going to plan the movement, plan whatever movement. So upper motor neurons located in the primary motor cortex of the precentral gyrus in the frontal lobe. And remember, the upper motor neuron on the right cerebral hemisphere will control the muscles on the left half of the body. The upper motor neurons on the left cerebral hemisphere will control the skeletal muscles on the right half of the body. So they are opposite. Now these are the upper motor neurons. These are the ones that are going to first plan the movement. They're going to plan the movement along with the basal nuclei. They're going to plan it. First planning has to occur. Okay? So these are the basal nuclei. So the neurons which are there in the frontal lobe are going to send information to the basal nuclei. This is the movement that is being planned. The basal nuclei will then make some adjustments and suggestions and send it back to the premotor, the primary motor cortex. Okay? So the primary motor cortex is going to plan the movement along with the basal nuclei. And then after that, the upper motor neurons, so this is the first step. The second step, the upper motor neurons will send information through the descending motor tracts, descending motor pathways. And which one is that? The most important of them is the corticospinal tract. It will send information to the lower motor neurons. So that's the next one, lower motor neurons. Where are the lower motor neurons located? The lower motor neurons are located, okay, these are located in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. In the ventral horn of the spinal cord, right here. The lower motor neurons will be here, ventral horn. So they'll come and synapse with these lower motor neurons. Okay, so the upper motor neuron, the axon will come all the way down, and as it is coming down, it will cross over. Okay, they'll cross over in the medulla oblongata, they'll cross over. That's why the right side controls the muscles on the left half of the body and vice versa, because these corticospinal tracts cross. Okay, so they come down and they synapse with the lower motor neurons which are located in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. And the axons, number 3, axons of the lower motor neurons come out through the spinal nerves to supply skeletal muscles. Okay, so you see lower motor neuron goes to the skeletal muscle, and you know what happens at the skeletal neuromuscular junction. This neuron, this nerve ending will release acetylcholine. Acetylcholine will then cause the muscle to contract. Okay, it's going to cause all those sliding and everything happening. So that's what happens. Okay, now as the muscle contracts, information goes back to the brain about how the muscle is contracting. So now you have, I told you, proprioceptors, the muscle spindle receptors that are there inside the muscle will send information back through the sensory nerves. It will go back to the spinal cord. From the spinal cord, it will travel up. It will go to the cerebellum. Okay, the cerebellum will receive information about how the muscle is contracting, how the movement is occurring. And then the cerebellum will compare whether the movement is happening according to the plan which was made initially. So it's going to compare notes. This is the plan that the primary motor cortex had. This is the movement that is happening. Is it going according to the plan, or does it need any adjustments? If it needs adjustments, the cerebellum will send information back to the primary motor cortex, telling it that the muscle needs to contract a little bit more strongly, or you need to reduce the contraction, otherwise there could be muscle damage. So the cerebellum will feed the suggestion to the primary motor cortex, and then the primary motor cortex will again send the information to correct the movement. Okay, so this is how. So next time when you're playing a game, or when you go for your exercise, when you go to the gym to exercise, whatever it may be, weights or treadmill or whatever, or if you do swimming or play a game, think about this. As movement is happening, as you're walking on the treadmill, your primary motor cortex is sending information to your muscles to move. But at the same time, there is constant information going back to the brain about whether the speed with which you're going or the amount of contraction, is it adequate for whatever you have set on the treadmill? If it's not, then the primary motor cortex will again make adjustments. Okay? So this is like a loop. This is like a loop. It continues to function as long as you're performing that voluntary movement. Okay? So even if any part of this loop is damaged, voluntary movement cannot occur properly. Okay? Any part, starting from the primary motor cortex, basal nuclei, cerebellum, motor tract, sensory, the muscle itself, the release of neurotransmitter, and then the sensory nerve. All of this has to be intact in order for a movement to occur. Okay? So this is the bare minimum of, so think about it. When you're actually, just when you get up and walk, think about this. Okay? Now, does all information have to go to the brain in order for the movement to occur? Not necessary. Remember, central nervous system is brain and spinal cord. So the spinal cord can also make decisions on its own without the information going to the brain. Okay? So the spinal cord has the ability to perform certain basic movements for which you don't need the brain to be consciously aware. Okay? Now that is what is called a reflex. A reflex is an automatic, subconscious, that means you're not conscious of performing that movement, automatic, subconscious or involuntary stereotype movement. Stereotype means it will always happen the same way. It's not going to change. It's not going to change. Okay? Automatic, stereotype, involuntary or subconscious response to an adequate sensory stimulus. Okay? That is called a reflex. Now, for a reflex, you don't need the brain. You need the spinal cord. That's it. It goes to the spinal cord and the spinal cord decides what needs to be done. Okay? Now, good example of this, all of us, we talk about reflexes. We say that, oh, your reflex is very fast. Or if a person is old, we say reflexes have slowed down. Okay? You think very fast. So a reflex is where, let's say, you touch a hot object. The immediate response is withdraw the hand. Okay? You're not thinking, oh, this is really hot, it's going to burn my skin, so that's why I need to take it out. It's not going to all that. Okay? If you start thinking about it, your skin will be burnt. It is an automatic response where you do it without thinking. Even a newborn baby will have the same reflex. A newborn baby, you put a hot object on it, it's going to withdraw. Okay? So even a newborn baby knows it. It's not like it is consciously aware what is temperature, what is heat. It doesn't know that. But this happens. The same thing. If you step on a sharp object, let's say you're at home, you don't have your footwear, you step on a sharp object. The immediate response is you lift your foot. You withdraw your foot. Okay? Nobody has to tell you. Nobody has to teach you this. It happens automatically. So this is a reflex. And we have learnt about reflex. We saw temperature when we did homeostasis. We talked about negative feedback reflex, positive feedback reflex. So this is the same thing. A reflex does not require conscious. It doesn't have to go all the way to the brain for you to understand. So a reflex arc, what are the components of a reflex arc? Now this is something we did in the very first few lectures when we did homeostasis. But I'm going to remind you again about this reflex arc. It is one of the basic functional units of the nervous system. Okay? The smallest portion that can produce a response. Okay? So if you look at a reflex arc or a reflex pathway, reflex arc or reflex pathway, there are 5 components to this pathway. There are 5 components. Anybody remembers? Anybody knows reflex? So let's say I touch a hot object. Okay? So the first thing is what? What is happening? You need to have a stimulus. Okay? So stimulus is the first. How do I know it is hot? Receptors. Okay? So there is a receptor, specific receptor that detects the stimulus. The next step, I know it is hot because the sensory nerve is carrying the information to my central nervous system. So you need a sensory nerve. To carry the information. And where does this information go? It has to reach the part where the analysis can happen. You need to know that this is temperature, hot temperature, cold temperature, whatever it is. You have to be able to figure out. So you need to go to an integrating center or an analysis center. Integrating center. What is the integrating center usually? It's usually brain or spinal cord. Always. Always CNS, brain or spinal cord. And then in order to withdraw my hand, my muscle has to contract. So I need a motor nerve for that. Motor nerve which is going to come and supply motor nerve that is going to come and stimulus, sensory nerve, motor nerve. And this motor nerve will come and, okay, it's going to supply the organ that is going to perform the response. So we call it the effector organ. We call it the effector organ. An effector organ could be muscles or glands. Muscles or glands. And then what is this effector organ going to do? It is going to produce the response. So you start with a stimulus and you end with a response. Okay? So this is a reflex pathway. This is the reflex pathway. So this is the basic mechanism by which your nervous system functions. You need to have a stimulus and then the nervous system will produce the response. Okay? Even if one component is damaged, in this reflex pathway, even if one component is damaged, the reflex will not occur. Okay? If the receptor is damaged, reflex cannot occur. If the effector organ is damaged, response will not occur. If the motor nerve is damaged, no. Sensory nerve, no. So all components have to be intact in order to have a reflex. Now this is, and I want you to know this diagram well, because this is showing you the pathway of the reflex arc. So this is the skin. This is the skin where you have the receptor. So it could be skin, it could be joint, it could be anything. But in this picture, the skin, which is where you have the receptor. And the stimulus is this prick of the skin, a nail or a needle pricking the skin. So that's the receptor. And then comes the next one, sensory nerve. Okay, the second component. So the stimulus, receptor, sensory nerve. Okay, always remember that it is a unipolar neuron, dorsal root ganglion. It has to go through the back of the spine. It will go here to the dorsal root, and then it will come and synapse in the posterior horn. This is the posterior horn. It will synapse with an interneuron. This is an interneuron. This interneuron connects the sensory nerve and the motor neuron. Okay? This is the motor neuron. So once it receives the action potential, the signal, it knows that it is pain, something has pricked it, so you have to withdraw the hand. So this motor neuron will then come out through the anterior root and it will supply the muscle that is going to withdraw the hand. Okay? So this is a picture of the reflex pathway. Now, it's not necessary that you should only have one interneuron. There could be multiple neurons. This is a simple reflex pathway. A more simpler one is this. Okay, take a look at this one. Here, you have the sensory nerve entering into the spinal cord and then directly synapsing with the motor neuron. So the sensory nerve enters the spinal cord and synapses with the motor neuron. There is no interneuron here. This is called a monosynaptic reflex. Okay? This is one of the simplest reflexes. Monosynaptic reflex. Whenever you have more than one synapse, you will call it polysynaptic reflex. Monosynaptic reflex. What does monosynaptic reflex mean? One synapse between the sensory nerve and motor neuron. That's it. Only one synapse. Now, if you look at this picture that I showed you, you will call this, because there's one synapse here, there's one synapse here, this becomes automatically, it becomes polysynaptic reflex. Okay, it's not a monosynaptic reflex, it is a polysynaptic reflex. Polysynaptic reflex. Monosynaptic, only one synapse in the spinal cord. More than one synapse, between the sensory nerve and motor neuron. That is a polysynaptic reflex. More than one. So 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter. All of them are polysynaptic reflexes. Okay? Now we're going to look at one example of a monosynaptic reflex. Okay? An example of a monosynaptic reflex is stretch reflex. Stretch reflex. What is a stretch reflex? Whenever a muscle is stretched, when a skeletal muscle is stretched, okay, you have the receptor. Remember I told you about muscle spindle receptor. So when a muscle is stretched, the muscle spindle receptor detects the stretch. The sensory nerve from the muscle spindle receptor carries the information into the spinal cord, okay? And this sensory nerve directly synapses with the motor neuron, which is controlling that skeletal muscle. And the motor nerve will then come out through the anterior root to the same muscle, and it will cause contraction of the muscle. The muscle contracts. So all of this, same pathway, reflex pathway. So in stretch reflex, what is the stimulus? Stimulus is gentle stretch of the muscle. What is the receptor? Muscle spindle receptor. Okay, and then you have the sensory nerve, which is the third component. Number 4, integrating center, spinal cord. Number 5, motor nerve. Number 6, effector organ, skeletal muscle. Did I put the numbers here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Number 7 is the response, contraction of the muscle. Contraction of the muscle that was stretched. Okay? So this is a very classic, simple monosynaptic reflex. And we test this in the clinic. If we suspect somebody has a neurological disorder, we can test stretch reflexes. So the most commonest stretch reflex, which I want you to know, is the patellar reflex. Example of stretch reflex. Patellar reflex, or it's also called the knee jerk reflex. Knee jerk reflex. Okay, knee jerk or patellar reflex. What do you do in the clinic? We gently tap the tendon of the quadriceps muscle using what is called a patellar hammer or a knee hammer. Okay, it's just a tool. I'll show it to you in the lab today with a little small triangular piece of rubber there, which will gently hit the patellar tendon below the knee, okay, which is where the quadricep muscle comes and attaches. So you just gently tap it, okay. When you tap it, you are gently stretching. So you are activating or stimulating the muscle spindle. So the muscle spindle will carry that information to the spinal cord. The motor nerve will bring the command back to the quadriceps muscle, and the quadriceps muscle will contract. And you know, when the quadriceps muscle contracts, the action of the quadriceps is to extend the knee joint. Okay, extension of the knee joint, so, or extension of the leg at the knee joint. So when you perform this, and you can try this in the lab today, when you hit the tendon, automatically, you are not consciously doing it, your leg will Gently. It's not like you're going to kick a soccer ball. It's gentle extension of the leg. Okay? So this can be done, this stretch reflex can be done from many muscles, not just this. This is one of the easiest to actually see, but we can do it from the biceps, we can do triceps reflex, we have ankle jerk reflex, we have lots of reflexes that we test. Okay? So this, I want you to remember knee jerk. This reflex I want you to know. Example of stretch reflex. Monosynaptic reflex, only one synapse. Okay? And what happens? Okay? So I've given you this. I've given you the steps. I want you to know knee jerk reflex well. Okay? Because this is one of the simplest ones. So here, there's no conscious awareness. It doesn't go to the brain. The brain is not needed for this. So even if you cut off the connection between the brain and the spinal cord, you will see this reflex. You will see this reflex because it's only the spinal cord that is doing it. Okay? The only thing, the reflex may become a little exaggerated, but that is, those are disorders. So we won't go into that. But what I want you to remember is here, the brain is not coming into the picture at all. It is just the spinal cord which is doing it. Okay? So, and please don't think this is the only stretch reflex. There are other stretch reflexes as well. One example for polysynaptic reflex would be, withdrawal reflex. Okay, withdrawal reflex, or also known as flexor withdrawal reflex, because it's the flexor muscles. If you know withdrawal reflex, that's fine. This is a polysynaptic reflex. That means there is more than one synapse in the spinal cord. Okay? Unlike the stretch reflex, which has only one synapse. Now, withdrawal reflex is exactly the thing that I told you. You touch a hot object, you immediately withdraw your hand. It's not just one muscle that is involved. There are multiple muscles that have to flex your arm away from the hot object. Okay? The same goes for if you step on a sharp object, stimulus is pain. Receptors will be the pain receptors in your sole of the foot. Okay? So here you're not stretching the muscle, it is pain receptors, or when you touch a hot object, it is temperature receptors in the skin. So this is then carried by a sensory nerve all the way into the spinal cord, and there are interneurons. Okay? So it doesn't directly synapse with the motor neuron. There are multiple. Here it's only showing one interneuron. There could be multiple interneurons synapsing. And then the motor neuron gets the command that the leg has to be withdrawn. So the information comes to the muscles of the thigh and the muscles of the leg, because there are more muscles here. And then the entire foot withdraws. Okay? So this is an example of a polysynaptic reflex. So remember, reflexes are protective in nature. Okay? They ensure that your body organs do not get injured. So they are protective reflexes. Now, let me ask you this question. Let's say you are walking barefoot and you step on a sharp nail. The leg which steps on the nail is going to flex. Okay? What will happen to the muscles on the opposite leg? What will happen? You are walking, you're standing, and you step on a sharp object. The pain is going to make you withdraw this leg. What's happening to the muscles on the opposite leg? Try standing on one leg. Get up and stand on one leg. Do it. Do it, yes. When I can do it, why can't you? At 63, I'm doing it. Do it. You're all young. Don't hold on to anything. Okay? Don't hold on. What is happening to the muscles of the other leg?
Try to hold it.
They are contracting in order to? Yes. So are they contracting or are they contracting to extend the foot? So that contraction means like that, shortening. They are contracting, but are they lengthening or shortening? They are lengthening in order to maintain the balance, right? Otherwise, if nothing happened on this side, you're going to fall. Yes or no? Yes. So you're maintaining your balance because these muscles are lengthening to support the entire weight of the body. Okay? So this is also a reflex. So whenever you have one leg withdrawing, the entire balance of the body falls on the opposite leg. Okay? And we call this the crossed extensor reflex. So the muscles of your opposite leg are actually lengthening in order to support the weight of the body. So they are contracting, but they are not shortening in length. They are actually lengthening in order to support the weight of the body. Remember isotonic and isometric contraction. Isotonic is when the muscle shortens. Isometric is when the length remains the same, but the cross bridges have formed. So the muscle is actually having a tension. It is contracting, but the length is not shortening. So that is what is happening here. So whenever there is, this is what we saw, flexor withdrawal reflex. So the interneurons connect with the motor neurons so that this leg moves up. But at the same time, information is also sent to the neurons of the opposite leg, okay, in order to maintain a tension to support the weight of the body. Okay, so two things are happening when you step on a sharp object. The leg which hits the sharp object flexes, whereas the opposite leg, so this, when I step on a sharp object, the information gets carried to the spinal cord, and then this muscle will contract so that I lift my leg. The same information goes to the motor neurons which are controlling the muscles on my opposite leg, and it will tell the muscles to lengthen and contract so that the support is there. So this is called the crossed extensor reflex, which is also an example of a polysynaptic reflex. Crossed extensor reflex, because your opposite leg is actually extending to maintain balance. So reflexes, you can think of any number of reflexes, any number. Think about temperature. If you go out in the cold today without proper clothing, okay, you don't have your jacket, you don't have it, you're going to start shivering automatically, okay? Muscles are going to start contracting, your involuntary shivering is going to occur. So that's a reflex action, because from the skin, the temperature goes to your brain, the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus detects that the outside is too cold, body temperature is decreasing. So in order to maintain the body temperature, you start shivering automatically. So shivering produces heat. So your body temperature is maintained until you reach your parking spot or wherever that is. So everything is a reflex. Lunchtime, you pass through the cafeteria, you smell something that you like, a favorite food of yours. What happens? Automatic salivation. You start salivating, okay? That's a reflex again, okay, brought about where the brain will be your integrating center. So you think of any number of actions that happen, all of them are reflexes, okay? When you start learning how to drive a car, you're very conscious. You're constantly looking at the traffic signal. If it is red, you know you have to step on the brakes, and then if it's green, you step on the gas. You're learning. Now, once you become a seasoned driver, automatic. It's a reflex. You don't even think about it. It's not even going to your conscious brain. The moment red, your leg automatically moves. So that's a reflex action. It's a learned reflex. You play an instrument. Initially, when you're learning, you're looking at the keys. You need to know which one is which. Once you play, then after that, you can play even with your eyes closed, because you know exactly where the keys are. So that is the memory. That is a learned reflex. So reflexes are inborn. Some reflexes are inborn, like what we saw. Withdrawal reflex, stretch reflex. These are inborn. You will see it even in a little kid, in a newborn baby. Okay? Certain reflexes are learned reflexes. As you go through life, you learn. Okay? And then it becomes a habit. Okay? So that's, again, a gag reflex. Okay? So if somebody were to touch, if the nurse wants to take a swab from the back of your throat, the automatic thing is to gag. Okay? The moment something touches the back of your throat, you gag. That is a reflex. But the integrating center is the brain. Okay? The pathway is the same. Pathway is exactly the same. There is a receptor, there is a sensory nerve. Pathway is the same. If there is a storm, you see dust particles. You're passing through a construction site, you're walking, and there is some dust coming. Your automatic response is to close your eyelids. Okay? Blink reflex. These are all reflexes. And we test all of these, okay? Remember that we test all of these when we suspect somebody has a neurological disorder or a nerve disorder. Okay? So if you're going to go into neurology, if you want to become a nurse practitioner in neurology, then you will learn about these test procedures, how to test all of this. These are all bedside tests. Okay? Now, what do reflexes help you with? In general, what are the functions? I've already told you. Protective. They protect you against painful stimuli. They definitely help you to maintain posture and balance. Okay? So, posture and balance whenever you're performing a voluntary movement. Running, exercising, playing a game, playing an instrument, the posture and balance has to be appropriate for that activity. So reflexes help to do that. Okay? And of course, they coordinate your muscle movement. Okay? Now, next semester when you take Bio 142, you will learn about internal reflexes which are not under your control. Reflexes which are internal. Reflexes that help to maintain the oxygen levels in your blood, the carbon dioxide levels in your blood. Reflexes that help to maintain blood pressure when you are exercising or when you are changing your position. Reflexes that lead to secretion of hormones. All of these are reflexes. Here, you're just looking at some basic muscle reflexes. But every homeostasis is basically maintained because of these reflexes. So whenever something changes, your body tries to bring it back to normal with the help of this reflex. So stimulus is a change. And then you will have a receptor that detects it, a sensory nerve that carries it to the brain or spinal cord, and then you will have a motor nerve, and then a response. The response could be either a muscle or glands or organs, which is what you will be learning next semester when you look at all the different body systems. Okay? So this is the overall function of reflexes, right? So whenever the spinal cord is damaged, now this is very quickly to tell you what can happen. If the spinal cord is damaged, and this can happen due to a severe whiplash injury when there is a road traffic accident and the neck just moves at a very fast speed, you can have the spinal cord getting cut. So the spinal cord can get cut completely or it can even cut partially. it can cause severe issues. So if the spinal cord gets damaged at the level of the thoracic or the lumbar region, you get, if you get it at the level of the neck, cervical region, quadriplegia. No sensations from your upper limbs, no sensations from your lower limbs, and no muscle movement. If the spinal cord gets damaged at the level of the thoracic or the lumbar region, then you have paraplegia. That is, both the lower limbs you will not see. So you're going to see a lot of these cases if you're going to be in neurology, if you're posted in a neurology unit as a nurse, you will be seeing all this. And when you're doing your nursing program, you will rotate through all this. So you will be seeing all of these. Okay, so there you go. These are all the different types of reflexes, okay? Withdrawal reflex, knee jerk, pupillary reflex, blood pressure, okay? There is every time a person goes to a doctor, their blood pressure can go up. And then when they go back home and test it, everything is normal, okay? So some people have the phobia about doctors. They don't want to go to the hospital. So the moment they go to the hospital, they get anxious and their blood pressure goes up, okay? We actually call it white coat hypertension. When they look at the white coat of the doctor or the nurse, the blood pressure goes up. So whenever you're anxious, it goes up. So that's another reflex, okay? So you learn about these when you go to your next semester. Do you know this one, pupillary reflex? When you shine light into the eye, what will happen? Huh? Pupil constricts, don't say shrink. Okay, so you have to use the right word. When light is shown into the eye, the pupil of the eye will constrict, it will become smaller. Okay, when you take the light away in a dark room, what will happen? The pupil will dilate. Okay, so use the correct anatomical physiological terms, constriction and dilation. So today we'll be looking at eye and ear in the lab. Okay, so that is about the peripheral nervous system. Okay, I think there's one more which is Babinski's. I will talk to you about Babinski's later. Okay, have you heard of ALS? Have you all heard of ALS? Yeah. It's a very debilitating disease, extremely debilitating disease. Here, the brain is perfectly okay, alert, able to think, able to solve problems. There's nothing wrong with the brain, but the motor neurons in the spinal cord are all the lower motor neurons. Okay? Upper as well sometimes. Upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons get damaged progressively, slowly, okay? And why they degenerate, why they lose function, we still don't know. But some people just develop it, okay? And the sad part is they will not be able to move any of their muscles, okay? But their thinking and everything will still be very sharp, okay? Only the motor neurons are destroyed. Upper motor, lower motor neurons, so they won't be able to move, muscle weakness. Okay, it's a very debilitating disease. It starts with the smaller muscles and then progresses until almost the entire body is paralyzed, no function, and then death usually occurs due to paralysis of the diaphragm, because diaphragm is a skeletal muscle. So people die because of that.
Is this what the scientist Steve Hawking experienced?
Yes. Yes, he had Lou Gehrig's, the same thing, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Yep. Okay, so peripheral nervous system, we have finished. So on Monday when you come, which is your last day of class, we will do autonomic nervous system, which is brief actually, there's not much. And like I said, I'll try and post audio files for some of these, okay? I think I should finish ANS. And today in the lab, we will do eye and ear. Okay, anatomy of the eye and the ear. So, just a reminder, your lab exam is on 10th, Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday the 10th at your usual lab time, which is 11:10. If you want to have a review, we can meet around 9:30 or 10 in the Science Learning Center for a review session for the lab exam. Okay. Your lecture exam is on Monday the 15th, December 15th. Okay. The time is actually not 11:10. It's actually 8 a.m. Yeah, 8 a.m. Even I didn't realize. I thought it would be 10 o'clock. Oh, it's 8 a.m. 8 to 9:40 on the 15th.
So
Okay.
for the lab exam, will there be no lecture?
No, on Wednesday there is not. Your last day of class itself is Monday the 8th. Okay, so Wednesday we only have the lab exam. You come a little early, say around 10ish to the Science Learning Center if you want to be there for the review session.
So 10 for sure.
10, yeah. Is that good? Because the exam will start at 11:10.
Why is there no study guide for chapter 15?
Chapter 15, is it not there? 15 is eye and ear, right? Is it eye and ear? Yes. Yes, I will post it for you, okay? Yeah. So, so the final exam, please remember, it is on December 15th, 8 a.m. 8 to 9:40, okay? So, I mean, at the same number of questions, you can come a little late, but don't come at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, okay? Because by that time, everything will be done. So please put it down in your calendar so that you don't forget, okay? I have to remember as well. So, okay? And the last of the mastering homework assignment, which is on peripheral nervous system, is already available on mastering. You have until December 15th, which is your exam day, 11:59 p.m. to finish that. Okay? And today in the lab, I'll give you back your lab reports, and then those of you who have not given some of them, you can check with me which labs you have not turned in so that you don't lose points over there. Okay? So that's it. Any other questions do you have?